Close your eyes and let the world around you fade into a soft, distant hum. Imagine you are standing in a vast open field, far away from the flickering lights of the city. Above you, the sky is a deep, endless velvet, dusted with the silver light of 1,000 stars. In this stillness, your eyes drift across the constellations, searching for a single, steady spark. There, hanging in the darkness like a dying ember, is a point of light that does not twinkle like the others. It glows with a faint, rusted hue, a pale orange-red that has captured the human imagination for as long as we have looked upward. This is Mars. For thousands of years, this red dot was a symbol of war and fire. To the ancient Sumerians, it was Nergal, the god of destruction. To the Greeks, it was Ares. To the Romans, Mars. They saw its blood-red color and associated it with the turbulence of human conflict. But as our understanding of the cosmos grew, the myths began to dissolve, replaced by a curiosity that was even more profound. We began to realize that this was not a god, but a world, a silent, frozen neighbor drifting through the same cold void as our own. As you breathe slowly and deeply, imagine the scale of the journey we're about to contemplate. When we talk about going to Mars, it sounds almost routine in our modern age. We hear the names of space agencies and private companies mentioned in the news, and we speak of colonizing the red planet as if it were the next natural step, like moving to a new city or crossing an ocean. But to truly understand the challenge of Mars, we must first confront the sheer, staggering reality of distance. Think back to the summer of 1969. The world watched in breathless silence as 3 men traveled to the moon. In the grand tapestry of the universe, the moon is our immediate neighbor. It orbits the Earth at a distance of about 384,000 kilometers. To our human minds, that sounds like a vast number, but light, the fastest thing in existence, can cross that gap in just over a second. When the Apollo astronauts looked out their windows, the Earth was always there, a massive, swirling marble of blue and white that filled the sky. They were only 3 days from home. If something went wrong, the Earth was a reachable sanctuary. Now, let the moon drift away in your mind. Imagine it shrinking until it is nothing more than a speck. To reach Mars, we must step out into a much deeper darkness. Mars does not sit at a fixed distance from us. Like us, it is a passenger on a great celestial carousel, orbiting the Sun at its own pace. At its very closest approach, a rare alignment known as opposition, Mars is still 55 million kilometers away. That is 140 times farther than the Moon. And that is the best-case scenario. Most of the time, the gap is much wider. When Mars and Earth are on opposite sides of the Sun, the distance swells to over 400 million kilometers. To visualize this, imagine the Earth is the size of a cherry. At this scale, the Moon would be a tiny peppercorn orbiting just over a foot away. But Mars? Even at its closest, that red peppercorn would be over 150 feet away. When it moves to the other side of the Sun, it would be nearly a mile away. Between the cherry and the peppercorn lies a void so vast it defies our earthly intuition. As we dwell on this distance, we must also consider the rhythm of the solar system. Everything in space is in motion. We are not standing still on a flat map. We are spinning on a globe that is hurtling around a star at 107,000 kilometers per hour. Mars is doing the same, though it moves more slowly, farther out in the cold. Because of these differing speeds, the distance between our two worlds is constantly stretching and contracting, like a great cosmic accordion. This movement creates what we call launch windows. We cannot simply decide to go to Mars on a whim. We must wait for the moment when the planets are aligned just right, a moment that occurs only once every 26 months. This is the heartbeat of Martian exploration. If a mission is not ready when the window opens, the opportunity vanishes. The engineers, the scientists, and the astronauts must step back and wait for another 2 years for the clockwork of the heavens to bring the worlds back into alignment. Imagine the pressure of those 26 months. Every bolt, every circuit, every gram of fuel must be accounted for. In the history of human exploration, we have never had to contend with a schedule dictated so strictly by the laws of planetary motion. When the ancient mariners set sail across the Atlantic, they waited for the trade winds. But the winds would always return within weeks or months. The winds that carry us to Mars are governed by the heavy, slow gravity of the Sun, and they require a patience that tests the very limits of our resolve. Now, let us think about the journey itself. You might imagine a rocket pointing its nose directly at Mars and firing its engines in a straight line, racing across the gap like a bullet. But the physics of the universe does not allow for such simplicity. To travel in a straight line would require a nearly infinite amount of fuel that we would then have to carry, which would make the rocket so heavy it could never leave the ground. Instead, we must become celestial hitchhikers. We use what is known as a home and transfer orbit. Imagine the Earth's orbit as a circle, and Mars's orbit as a larger circle outside of it. To get from one to the other, we launch our craft and put it into an elliptical path, a long, graceful curve that touches our orbit at one end and the Martian orbit at the other. We are essentially falling toward the outer solar system in a controlled manner. This journey is a testament to the elegance of mathematics. We do not fight the gravity of the Sun, we use it. Once the initial burn of the engines is complete, the spacecraft shuts down its primary propulsion. For the vast majority of the trip, the ship is silent. There is no roar of engines, no vibration of machinery. It is a ghost ship, coasting through the vacuum at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, guided only by the invisible hands of gravity. In this silence, time becomes the primary obstacle. This graceful, energy-efficient curve takes time, usually between 7 and 9 months. 7 months of drifting through a void where there is no up or down, no wind and no sound. Consider what 7 months truly means. It is the span of 2 seasons on Earth. In 7 months, a seed planted in a garden can grow, bloom, and begin to wither. On Earth, 7 months is enough time for empires to shift, for children to learn to walk, for the world to change in a million small ways. But for the travelers on their way to Mars, those 7 months are spent in a pressurized metal tube, surrounded by the absolute zero of space. As the Earth falls away, the psychological shift is profound. In the first few days, the Earth is a magnificent, glowing presence that dominates the window. You can see the swirls of storms over the Pacific, the brown expanse of the Sahara, the white caps of the Himalayas. It is home. It is everything. But as the weeks turn into months, the Earth begins to shrink. It fades from a world into a disk, then from a disk into a bright star. Eventually, it becomes just one more point of light among billions, distinguished only by its steady sapphire glow. There is a term for this, the overview effect. Astronauts in low Earth orbit often describe a feeling of deep connection to the planet when they see it from above. But on the way to Mars, this effect evolves into something else, perhaps a detachment effect. For the first time in 300,000 years of human history, a group of people will be so far away, that they can hide the entire human race behind their outstretched thumb. Every person you have ever heard of, every war ever fought, every book ever written, exists on that tiny blue speck that is slowly disappearing into the dark. This isolation is not just psychological, it is physical. On Earth, we are used to instant communication. We send a text, and it arrives halfway across the world in a heartbeat. But the speed of light, while fast, is not infinite. As the ship moves farther from home, the delay in communication grows. At first, it is a few seconds, a slight, awkward pause in a conversation, but soon it becomes minutes. By the time the crew is halfway to Mars, a simple "How are you?" takes 10 minutes to reach Earth, and the answer takes another 10 minutes to return. This 20-minute round trip changes the very nature of human interaction. There can be no real-time guidance from mission control. If a fuse blows or a computer freezes, the crew cannot wait for instructions. They must be the masters of their own destiny. They are more alone than the explorers of the 15th century, who were at least surrounded by the familiar air and water of their home planet. These travelers are separated from life by a vacuum that would claim them in seconds, and by a distance that light itself struggles to bridge. As we contemplate this first part of the journey, let us reflect on the audacity of the attempt. We are a species that evolved to walk on grass, to breathe moist air, and to live under the protective blanket of a thick atmosphere and a magnetic field. Everything about our biology is tied to the Earth. Our bones are weighted for its gravity. Our eyes are tuned to the light of its sun. Our internal clocks are set to its 24-hour rotation. To go to Mars is to leave our biological cradle. It is to challenge the very physics that created us. And yet, we look at that red spark in the sky and we feel a pull. It is the same pull that led our ancestors out of the Rift Valley, across the land bridges of the ice ages, and over the horizons of the great oceans. We are a wandering species, and Mars is the next great horizon. In the silence of your mind, imagine the ship now, millions of kilometers from anywhere. It is a tiny island of light and warmth in a cold, indifferent sea. Inside, the air is recycled, the water is reclaimed, and the rhythm of life is measured by the ticking of clocks and the steady glow of monitors. Outside the thick hull, the stars are brilliant and unblinking, shining with a cold ferocity that no one on Earth can truly imagine. The journey has only just begun. The crew is settled into the long wait of the transit. They are suspended between two worlds, one that is fading into a memory and one that is growing into a reality. The red planet is waiting. It is a world of dust and ancient volcanoes, of frozen deserts and butterscotch skies. It has waited for 4 billion years for the arrival of life, and as the ship coasts through the darkness, the gap is slowly, inevitably closing. Rest now in the thought of that long, silent journey. Feel the weightlessness of the craft as it glides through the void. There is no rush, no noise, only the steady, patient movement of the spheres. The stars are your companions, and the darkness is a vast, peaceful ocean. In the next part of our story, we will go inside the ship to feel the challenges of the long transit and the strange, haunting beauty of life among the stars. But for now, let the distance and the silence wrap around you like a blanket. The red planet is there, a steady light in the dark, calling us forward, 1 kilometer at a time. As you drift deeper into relaxation, consider the sheer emptiness of the space between the worlds. It is not a void of nothingness, but a field of forces. Gravity wells and radiation streams, the solar wind and the ancient light of distant galaxies. We often think of space as a vacuum, But for the navigator, it is a complex landscape of energy. The ship is not just floating, it is surfing on the curvature of space-time itself. Think of the scientists back on Earth who calculated this path years before the launch. They used equations derived by men like Kepler and Newton, individuals who looked at the stars with nothing more than basic telescopes and the power of human thought. These thinkers realized that the planets follow laws, patterns that can be predicted with startling precision. When we send a probe or a crew to Mars, we are trusting our lives to the fact that the universe is orderly, that the math we do in a quiet room on Earth holds true in the frozen reaches beyond our atmosphere. There is a profound peace in that order. The planets do not wobble or stray. They follow their paths with a reliability that has lasted for eons. The Sun, the great anchor of our system, holds everything in its invisible grip, providing the light and the gravity that make this entire dance possible. As you sleep, or as you rest, you can take comfort in that same order. The Earth continues its steady spin, the Moon continues its silent orbit, and the path to the red planet remains open, a bridge of mathematics and ambition stretching across the dark. The first part of the Great Divide is not just a distance of kilometers, it is a distance of the spirit. To bridge it, we must be willing to let go of the familiar. We must be willing to watch the green hills and blue oceans of our birth disappear until they are nothing but a story we tell ourselves in the dark. It is a sacrifice of the highest order, made in the pursuit of a knowledge that can be found nowhere else. Imagine, for a moment, that you are no longer a passenger on the surface of a planet, but a resident of a machine. The silence of the void is not a true silence. It is filled with the constant, low-frequency thrum of life support systems, a mechanical heartbeat that never falters. This sound, a blend of whirling fans and the soft hiss of oxygen being released into the cabin, becomes the background music of your existence. It is the sound of survival. In this metal cocoon, suspended between the sapphire glow of a receding Earth and the rusted promise of Mars, the very concept of a day begins to dissolve. On Earth, our sense of time is dictated by the sun. We wake as the light spills over the horizon, and we rest as the shadows lengthen. But here, millions of kilometers from home, the sun is a brilliant, unblinking eye that never sets. To maintain a sense of sanity, the ship's computers must simulate the rhythms of our home world. Every 24 hours, the lights in the common areas slowly dim to a deep twilight purple, signaling the time for rest. Every morning, they brighten with a crisp, artificial dawn. This is a fragile theater of biology, played out in a place where nature never intended humans to be. As the weeks turn into months, the interior of the ship becomes a landscape as familiar as the streets of your childhood. You know every weld on the bulkheads, every scuff on the floor padding, every flickering LED on the control panels. In the history of human exploration, there has never been a confinement quite like this. When the great explorers of the Victorian era sought the Northwest Passage or the source of the Nile, they were often trapped in the ice or lost in the wilderness for years, but they were still surrounded by the earth. They could smell the salt air, or the damp earth, or the scent of rain. They could see the clouds moving across the sky. For the traveler to Mars, there are no clouds. There is no weather. There is only the static environment of the habitat. The air you breathe has been through the lungs of your crewmates 1,000 times. The water you drink was once part of a chemical cycle that reclaimed every drop of moisture from the cabin's atmosphere. This is the reality of the closed-loop system, a masterpiece of engineering that mirrors the Earth's own biosphere, but on a scale so small it feels almost intimate. Think of the Sabatier reactor, a piece of technology named after a French chemist from the early 20th century. It sits in the belly of the ship, silently performing a chemical miracle. It takes the carbon dioxide exhaled by the crew and combines it with hydrogen to create water and methane. This water is then split apart by electricity through electrolysis, releasing fresh oxygen back into the cabin. It is a perfect, circular dance of molecules. On Earth, the vast forests and oceans perform this task for us, filtering our air and providing our water through the grand, slow movements of the planet. Here, that entire global process is distilled into a series of titanium tanks and whirring pumps. But as the machinery hums, the human body begins to undergo a transformation. We are creatures of gravity. Every cell in our body, from the marrow in our bones to the fluid in our inner ears, has been sculpted by the 9.8 meters per second squared pull of the Earth. When that pull is removed, the body becomes confused. In the first few days of weightlessness, the fluid in your body, the blood, the lymph, the water, drifts upward. Your face becomes slightly puffy, your legs become thin, and your sinuses feel a constant mild pressure. It is a sensation known as puffy face, bird leg syndrome. But the changes go deeper than the surface. Without the weight of your body to support, your bones begin to realize they are no longer needed for structural integrity. They begin to leak calcium into your bloodstream, effectively dissolving from the inside out. In a single month of spaceflight, an astronaut can lose as much bone density as an elderly person on Earth loses in a year. To combat this, the crew must spend hours every day strapped into specialized exercise machines. Imagine running on a treadmill while being pulled down by heavy bungee cords, trying to convince your skeleton that it still has a purpose. The sound of the treadmill becomes another part of the ship's rhythm, a rhythmic pounding that echoes through the hull, a physical protest against the weightlessness of the void. While the body struggles with the lack of gravity, it also faces a hidden, silent siege from the stars themselves. On Earth, we live beneath a protective blanket. Our atmosphere is equivalent to a wall of lead 10 meters thick, and the Earth's magnetic field acts as a shield, deflecting the high-energy particles that stream from the Sun and the distant reaches of the galaxy. In deep space, that shield is gone. Galactic cosmic rays are the ghosts of ancient celestial cataclysms. They are the remnants of supernovas that exploded millions of years ago, sending atomic nuclei racing through the universe at nearly the speed of light. They are so powerful that they can pass through the hull of the ship as if it were made of tissue paper. When they strike the metal of the ship, they shatter the atoms in the hull, creating a secondary spray of radiation that can be even more damaging than the original particle. As you drift through this part of the journey, imagine the crew sleeping in their small padded bunks. To protect themselves, they have lined the walls of their sleeping quarters with bags of water and containers of food. Hydrogen is one of the best shields against cosmic radiation, and since water is rich in hydrogen, the very supplies they need to survive become their armor. They sleep inside a cocoon of their own sustenance, protected by the water they will drink and the food they will eat. The sun, too, is a source of constant vigilance. Most of the time, it is a steady provider of light and power for the ship's solar panels. But occasionally, it erupts. A solar flare, or a coronal mass ejection, can send a wave of lethal radiation washing over the ship in a matter of hours. The ship's sensors are always watching, listening for the telltale signs of a solar storm. If a flare is detected, the crew must retreat to a storm shelter, the most heavily shielded part of the ship, and wait. For days, they might huddle in a space no larger than a walk-in closet, listening to the silence, knowing that just outside the metal walls, the very space they are traveling through has become a radioactive furnace. This constant, low-level stress of survival creates a unique psychological landscape. In the early months, the novelty of the mission and the beauty of the stars provide a sense of wonder. But as the middle of the journey approaches, the long transit begins to weigh on the mind. Boredom becomes a physical presence. On Earth, boredom is a temporary state, easily cured by a walk outside or a conversation with a stranger. On the way to Mars, there is no outside, and there are no strangers. There is only the same small group of people, the same recycled air, and the same four walls. History gives us glimpses of how humans handle such isolation. We look at the winter rover crews at the South Pole, who spend 6 months in total darkness, cut off from any hope of rescue. They describe a phenomenon called the Big Eye, a state of staring blankly into space, where the mind seems to slow down to match the pace of the environment. They experience irritability, sleep disturbances, and a strange, lingering sense of melancholy. But the Mars crew has an even greater challenge: the disappearing Earth. In the 1800s, sailors on long voyages could still look at the moon and the stars and know they were the same ones their families were seeing. But for these travelers, the Earth is no longer a world. It is a blue star, and even that star is getting dimmer. The psychological umbilical cord that connects us to our home is being stretched to the breaking point. To cope, the crew fills their time with routine. They maintain the ship with a religious devotion, cleaning filters, checking seals, and running simulations. They celebrate small milestones: the 100th day, the halfway point, the moment they cross the orbit of a distant asteroid. Food becomes a central pillar of their morale. In the beginning, they may have had fresh vacuum-packed fruits or vegetables. But as the months pass, the menu shifts entirely to rehydrated meals. The simple act of eating becomes a ritual of memory. A meal that smells like garlic or lemon can transport an astronaut back to a kitchen on Earth, providing a brief, sensory escape from the sterile environment of the ship. They might even try to grow a few small plants in a hydroponic garden, not for the calories they provide, but for the sheer, life-affirming sight of something green and growing in a world of grey metal and black space. Think of the tyranny of the rocket equation, a concept first calculated by the Russian schoolteacher Konstantin Tsiolkovsky at the turn of the 20th century. He realized that to move a certain mass, you need fuel. But that fuel has mass itself, which requires more fuel to move, which in turn requires even more fuel. This mathematical trap dictates everything about the ship. Every kilogram of weight has been agonized over. The books they read are digital. The tools they use are multi-purpose. Even the clothes they wear are designed to be worn for weeks and then discarded or recycled, because a washing machine would require too much water and too much mass. As the ship moves further into the void, the stars seem to burn with a renewed intensity. Without an atmosphere to twinkle through, they are steady, piercing needles of light. The Milky Way is not a faint smudge, but a brilliant, glowing river of dust and suns that spans the entire sky. In the observation dome, if the ship has one, a traveler can sit and look out at the true face of the universe. It is a sight of terrifying beauty, a reminder of how small we are, and yet how extraordinary it is that we have built a machine capable of carrying us through this abyss. The journey is now in its 5th month. The initial excitement has long since faded, replaced by a quiet, determined endurance. The crew has become a single organism, their movements synchronized, their moods interlinked. They have learned to read the subtle changes in the hum of the fans and the vibrations of the hull. They are no longer people from Earth. They are people of the ship. In the distance, ahead of the bow, the red planet is no longer a star. It has grown into a small, distinct disk. It is no longer a rusted ember, but a world of features. The dark smudge of Syrtis Major, the white cap of the northern pole, the vast scar of Valles Marineris. The gravity of Mars is beginning to make itself felt, a faint, ghostly tug that signals the end of the long fall through the dark. The transition from deep space transit to orbital arrival is a time of renewed tension. The silence of the coasting phase is about to be broken. The engines, cold for months, must now be primed. The navigators are checking and rechecking their calculations, knowing that if they arrive at the wrong angle, they will either skip off the Martian atmosphere back into the void or plunge too deeply and be consumed by the friction. As the ship approaches, the scale of the Martian landscape becomes breathtaking. This is a world with volcanoes 3 times the height of Everest and canyons that would stretch from New York to Los Angeles. It is a world that has been dead for billions of years, its oceans lost to space, its atmosphere stripped away by the solar wind. It is a graveyard of a world, yet it holds the secrets of our own origin. The crew prepares for the descent. They strap themselves into their seats, the familiar weight of gravity about to return in a violent, chaotic rush. The long transit is over. The 7 months of silence, of recycled air, of the Big Eye and the disappearing Earth have led to this moment. They are at the doorstep of the red planet. There is no pause in the momentum of the mission. The transition from the vacuum of space to the thin, cold air of Mars is a bridge of fire. The heat shield, which has been a silent passenger for millions of kilometers, is now the only thing standing between the crew and a temperature of 2,000 degrees Celsius. The ship begins to vibrate, a low rumble that builds into a bone-shaking roar as the first wisps of the Martian atmosphere claw at the hull. The travelers look out, but they see only the orange glow of ionized gas. The Earth is gone. The stars are gone. There is only the heat, the roar, and the inevitable pull of the red world below. They have crossed the Great Divide. They have survived the long transit, and now they are falling into the history of a new world. The dust of Mars, undisturbed for eons, is about to feel the heat of a human arrival. The story of the ship is ending, and the story of the surface is about to begin. Every vibration, every alarm, and every heartbeat is a testament to the journey that has brought them here. A journey of 7 months that has changed them forever, turning them from inhabitants of a garden into pioneers of a desert. As the roar of the atmospheric entry intensifies, the memory of the silent, starlit months remains a quiet sanctuary in the back of their minds. They have learned the lesson of the void, that life is a rare and precious flame, and that to carry it across the darkness is the greatest challenge of all. The red planet rises to meet them, vast and indifferent, a world of stone and shadow, waiting for the first footprints to mark its ancient dust. The long silence is over, and the new world is calling. The roar of the atmospheric entry is not a sound you hear with your ears alone. It is a violent, deep-spectrum vibration that resonates through the very marrow of your bones. For 7 months, you have lived in a world of absolute silence, where the only movement was the weightless drift of a pen or the slow, rhythmic pulse of the life support fans. Now, the physics of the universe has reclaimed you. The thin, cold air of Mars, which seemed like nothing more than a ghost from orbit, has suddenly become a wall of fire. Outside the thick windows, The stars have vanished, replaced by a churning, incandescent shroud of orange and white plasma. The heat shield, a masterpiece of material science, is now enduring temperatures of over 2000 degrees Celsius. This is the moment where human engineering meets the raw, unyielding power of planetary mechanics. The spacecraft is screaming through the Martian sky at 20,000 kilometers per hour, using the friction of the atmosphere to bleed off its tremendous kinetic energy. It is a controlled fall, a high-stakes gamble written in the language of aerodynamics. As you sit strapped into your seat, the pressure builds. After months of zero gravity, the return of weight feels like an impossible burden. It starts as a gentle nudge, then grows into a heavy, crushing hand pressing you back into the padding. 2 Gs, 3 Gs. Your lungs feel heavy, and your vision narrows as your body struggles to remember how to function under the influence of a planetary mass. But this is a necessary weight. Every bit of pressure you feel is speed being surrendered, a violent deceleration that is the only way to reach the surface in one piece. To understand why this landing is so terrifying, we must look at the history of those who came before. In the mid-1970s, the Viking landers were the first to successfully touch down and send back images of the surface. They were robotic pioneers, sent at a time when our computers were less powerful than a modern digital watch. The engineers of the Viking era knew what we know now. Mars is a cruel mistress for a landing. On Earth, the atmosphere is thick enough to slow a craft down almost entirely with parachutes. On the Moon, there is no air at all, allowing for a clean, rocket-powered descent. But Mars is the worst of both worlds. Its atmosphere is just thick enough to create lethal heat, but too thin to provide enough drag for a safe landing. Think of the 7 minutes of terror. This is the window of time it takes to go from the top of the atmosphere to a dead stop on the dust. Because of the communication delay we discussed, the entire process must be automated. By the time the signal reaches Earth that the craft has hit the atmosphere, the landing is already over. The crew is either standing on the surface or they have become a new crater in the Red Plains. They are the ultimate passengers, trusting their lives to millions of lines of code and the integrity of a few thousand bolts. As the craft slows to Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, the next phase of the mechanical ballet begins. A parachute, larger than a city block and reinforced with Kevlar, is mortar-fired into the supersonic stream. The jolt is instantaneous, a violent snap that feels as though the ship is being torn in half. On Earth, a parachute this size would drift slowly to the ground. On Mars, it barely provides enough resistance to keep the craft from plummeting. Then, the heat shield falls away. For the first time in 7 months, the ground is visible. It is a blur of rust-red craters and dark volcanic shadows, rushing up at a terrifying speed. The radar begins to ping, searching for the solid reality of the surface. At a few hundred meters above the ground, the parachute is cut loose. For a terrifying heartbeat, the ship is in freefall. Then, the retro rockets ignite. The sound changes from a roar to a high-pitched metallic whine. The descent engines carve into the Martian air, fighting the pull of gravity with blue-white plumes of fire. The ship hovers, searching for a level spot among the rocks. Then, with a final, gentle sigh of the thrusters, the motion stops. The vibration dies away. The heavy hand of G-force settles into a steady, light pull. The 0.38 gravity of Mars. Silence returns. But it is a different silence than the one you left behind in the void. It is the silence of a world. Wait for the silence to settle. You are there, After millions of kilometers, after the long months of isolation and the fire of the entry, you are resting on the dust of another planet. For a long time, no one moves. You simply listen to the cooling of the metal, the soft pings and ticks as the ship adjusts to the frigid Martian air. Through the small, thick portholes, the view is unlike anything a human eye has ever seen in person. The sky is not blue. It is a pale, butterscotch hue, the color of a hazy desert afternoon. The sun, appearing only 2/3 its usual size, hangs in the sky like a cold, bright coin. The horizon is sharp and close, a jagged line of red rocks and fine, flour-like dust. There are no trees. There are no birds. There is no movement except for the occasional swirl of a dust devil, a ghostly column of red sand dancing across the plains of Chryse Planitia or the craters of Gusev. As you prepare to step out, you must confront the reality of the environment. Mars is not just a desert, it is a masterpiece of hostility. The air outside is 95% carbon dioxide. To breathe, it would be instant death. The atmospheric pressure is so low that if you stepped out without a pressurized suit, the oxygen would literally be pulled from your blood, and your bodily fluids would begin to boil at room temperature. It is a world that demands a suit as complex as a spaceship just to survive a walk of a few meters. But it is the dust that is the true ruler of Mars. Martian dust is not like the dust on Earth, which is mostly made of organic matter and weathered rock. On Mars, the dust is volcanic, abrasive, and chemically active. It is laced with perchlorates, toxic salts that would devastate the human thyroid if inhaled. Because the planet is so dry, this dust is electrostatically charged. It sticks to everything. It clings to the seals of the airlock, the visors of the helmets, and the delicate joints of the machinery. To live on Mars is to engage in a constant, losing battle against the red powder of the plains. As you take your first steps onto the surface, the sensation of gravity is haunting. You feel light, as if you're walking through a dream. A leap that would take effort on Earth sends you drifting upward in a slow, graceful arc. Your equipment, which weighed hundreds of pounds on the launch pad, now feels manageable, almost buoyant. It is a seductive feeling, a lightness that masks the underlying danger of the landscape. You look down at your boots. The footprints you leave are the first to disturb this soil in 4 billion years. On Earth, a footprint in the sand is gone with the next tide or the next rain. On Mars, where there is no liquid water and the wind is too thin to move anything but the finest particles, your tracks might remain for centuries. You are writing a permanent history onto a world that has known only the slow, patient erosion of the eons. As the first Martian evening approaches, the world undergoes a spectacular transformation. On Earth, we are used to red and orange sunsets, the result of sunlight scattering through a thick, moist atmosphere. But on Mars, the physics of light is inverted. Because of the fine dust particles in the air, the sky near the sun turns a haunting, icy blue. As the small sun sinks toward the horizon, the butterscotch sky deepens into a bruised purple, and then a cold electric blue glow settles over the landing site. It is a moment of profound beauty, a reminder that you are truly a stranger in a strange land. The temperature begins to plummet. During the day, in the height of the Martian summer, it might have reached a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius near the ground. But as the sun vanishes, the thin atmosphere fails to hold the heat. The temperature drops to -60, then -80. The CO2 in the air begins to form a thin frost on the rocks. Inside the habitat, you are protected by layers of high-tech insulation and powerful heaters. But the cold outside is a physical presence, a reminder of the planet's indifference to your survival. This first night on the surface is a time of quiet reflection. You are no longer moving. You are a resident of a new world. The habitat, which was your ship, is now your home. It is a pressurized bubble of Earth, a small pocket of 21% oxygen and 1G simulated comfort, sitting in the middle of a frozen, toxic wasteland. You listen to the wind. On Earth, the wind has a voice. It rustles the leaves. It whistles through the eaves of a house. On Mars, the wind is a low, haunting moan. Because the air is so thin, even a storm of 100 kilometers per hour would feel like nothing more than a gentle breeze against your suit. But the sound it makes as it vibrates against the hull of the habitat is a constant, eerie reminder of the vacuum that waits just outside the door. You think of the scientists who first mapped this world. You think of Percival Lowell, who in the late 19th century looked through a telescope and thought he saw canals, the work of a dying civilization trying to bring water from the poles to the deserts. We know now that there are no canals. There is no civilization. There is only a world that died young, a planet that once had thick atmospheres and flowing rivers, but lost them to the relentless stripping of the solar wind. Mars is a mirror of what Earth could have been, or what it might one day become. In the quiet of the habitat, as the crew sleeps, you might look at the sensors and see the faint, rhythmic shaking of the ground. Mars is not geologically dead, but its heart beats slowly. These Marsquakes are the dying gasps of a planet that has almost entirely cooled. Every vibration tells a story of the deep crust, of the ancient cooling of the core, and of the history of a world that has been silent for billions of years. The first part of your mission on the surface is not about exploration, but about establishment. You are a gardener in a land where nothing grows. You must set up the solar arrays, brush the dust from the panels, and verify that the oxygen generators are functioning. You are building a foothold. Every hour you survive on the surface is a victory for the human spirit. But as you look out at the vast, empty plains of the red planet, a new question begins to form. It is one thing to arrive, it is another to stay, and it is something else entirely to leave. The journey home is a challenge that dwarfs the arrival. To get back to Earth, you will need fuel, and you cannot bring it all with you. You will have to become a chemist of the Martian soil, mining the very air and ground for the energy to escape. As the blue sunset fades into a deep, star-choked black, you see a familiar light rising in the east. It is a bright, steady blue spark, far brighter than any other star in the Martian sky. It is Earth. From here, it is not a world of politics and problems. It is a shimmering jewel, a distant memory of a place where you can breathe without a suit and walk without fear. It is a sight that fills you with both a profound longing and an incredible pride. You have crossed the abyss. You have survived the fire. You are an inhabitant of the fourth planet, a witness to the butterscotch dawn and the blue sunset. The story of Mars is no longer just a history of telescopes and robotic rovers. It is now a history of footprints and heartbeats. The silence of the plains has been broken, and though the planet is hostile, though the dust is toxic and the cold is biting, the humans are here. They are resting in their small, warm bubble, dreaming of the red dust and the blue stars, preparing for the long work of turning a wasteland into a home. Rest now in the stillness of the Martian night. The wind is moaning softly against the hull. The frost is forming on the rocks, and the earth is a silent blue watcher in the sky. The journey has been long, and the challenges ahead are vast. But for tonight, you are safe. You have reached the red world, and the red world has accepted you for now. The dust is still, the sensors are steady, and the history of the next world is being written in the quiet rhythm of your breath. The darkness of Mars is deeper than any darkness on Earth. Without the glow of cities or the moisture of the air to scatter the light, the stars are brilliant beyond description. You can see the moons, Phobos and Deimos, as they race across the sky. Small, lumpy rocks that look more like captured asteroids than the majestic moon of Earth. Phobos moves so fast that it rises and sets twice in a single Martian day, a wandering traveler in the night sky. As you drift towards sleep in the low gravity, your mind wanders over the vastness of what you have achieved. You are a pioneer of the 21st century, a bridge between the world of your birth and the world of the future. The red planet is no longer a mystery, it is a reality. It is the ground beneath your feet. And as the heaters hum and the oxygen flows, you know that tomorrow you will wake up to a butterscotch sky and begin the work of the new world. The second part of the surface day is about to begin. The transition from survival to science, from landing to living. But that is a story for the next dawn. For now, let the blue light of the Martian sunset linger in your mind. Let the lightness of the 0.38 gravity ease the tension in your muscles. The red world is at peace, and so are you. The history of the future has begun, and you are its first chapter. Fade into a very low, rhythmic, mechanical hum. As the night deepens, the habitat settles. The expansion and contraction of the metal slows as the external temperature stabilizes at its lowest point. The crew's breathing is the only sound in the sleeping quarters. Outside, the vastness of the Val Marineris and the heights of Olympus Mons sit in the dark, ancient and unmoved. They have waited for billions of years for this moment, and they will wait for billions more. But for the first time, there is a light on the plains, a small, defiant spark of human life in the middle of the red dark. This is the end of the arrival, but the beginning of the presence. The fire of the entry is a memory, the silence of the transit is a ghost, and the reality of Mars is the only thing that remains. Sleep deeply, knowing that you have done what was once thought impossible. You have reached across the void and touched the face of another world. And as you dream, the red dust of Mars continues its slow, eternal dance around your silent, sleeping home. The transition from the chaos of landing to the rhythm of surface life is a slow, quiet unfolding of consciousness. Imagine the habitat, not as a ship anymore, but as a laboratory, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a sanctuary. The walls are thick, multi-layered composites designed to stop the high-energy particles that rain down from the sun. But they are also the only things that separate you from a world that wants to boil your blood and freeze your skin. In this part of our journey, we step away from the drama of the descent and enter the long, meditative stretch of the Martian stay. A day on Mars is called a sol. It is slightly longer than an Earth day, 24 hours and 39 minutes. This small difference sounds negligible, but it is enough to slowly desynchronize you from the world you left behind. Every day, your schedule shifts forward. Your noon slowly drifts into the Earth's evening, and then into its midnight. This is the first subtle reminder that you no longer belong to the Earth's clock. You are now a citizen of the fourth planet, governed by its rotation, its tilt, and its long, lonely orbit around the sun. As you wake up in your small, padded bunk, the first thing you notice is the sound. It is not the silence of the void, nor the roar of the landing. It is the steady, reassuring hum of the life support system. On Earth, we take the air for granted. It is everywhere, free and invisible. On Mars, every breath is a manufactured product. You find yourself listening to the fans with a sort of subconscious intensity. If the pitch changes, if the rhythm stutters, your heart rate quickens before your mind even knows why. To live here is to be in a constant, silent dialogue with the machines that keep you alive. Outside the airlock, the landscape is a masterclass in stillness. On Earth, nature is noisy. There is the rustle of leaves, the chirp of insects, the distant rumble of traffic or the crashing of waves. Even in the deepest desert, there is the sound of life. But on Mars, the only sound is the wind. Because the atmosphere is so thin, less than 1% of Earth's pressure, the wind doesn't howl or whistle. It is a low-frequency moan, a ghostly vibration that you feel through the hull more than you hear with your ears. It is the sound of a world that hasn't seen a drop of rain in billions of years. Let us consider the chemistry of your survival. You cannot bring enough oxygen or water from Earth to last for years. To stay on Mars is to become a chemist. You must harvest the planet itself. This is what scientists call in situ resource utilization, or ISRU. It sounds like a dry, technical term, but it is actually a beautiful, ancient concept, living off the land. Imagine a machine sitting outside the habitat, connected by a series of insulated hoses. It is a MOXIE unit, or perhaps a larger descendant of it. It breathes in the thin Martian air, which is almost entirely carbon dioxide. Through a process of solid oxide electrolysis, it heats that CO2 to 800 degrees Celsius, stripping away the oxygen atoms and releasing them into a storage tank. This is the forest of Mars, a mechanical tree that exhales the breath of life in a land of poison. As you watch the monitors, you see the levels in the oxygen tanks slowly, steadily rising. There is a profound peace in seeing those numbers grow. It is the sound of the future. But oxygen is only half the battle. To eventually leave this world, you need fuel. And to get fuel, you must look into the Martian soil. Recent discoveries have changed our view of the red planet. We once thought it was a bone-dry desert, a world of nothing but dust and stone. But we now know that just beneath the surface, and in vast glaciers at the poles, there is water. It is frozen as hard as rock, mixed with the red soil, but it is there. Think of the effort required to harvest it. You would need robotic rovers or astronauts in heavy suits to mine the permafrost, bringing the icy soil back to a processor that melts and purifies it. This water is then split, using electricity into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen goes to your breathing tanks, and the hydrogen is combined with the CO2 from the air to create methane, rocket fuel. This is the miracle of the Sabatier reaction, the same process that helps sustain the crew on the long transit, but now applied to the scale of a world. You are literally making the means of your return out of the air and the dirt. It is a slow, methodical process. It takes months, perhaps a year, to generate enough fuel for the trip home. This wait defines your stay. You are not just exploring, you are waiting for your gas tank to fill up, atom by atom, molecule by molecule. In the meantime, the work of exploration begins. When you step outside in your suit, the world feels vast and ancient. In the 0.38 gravity, your movements are slow and deliberate. You are a heavy creature made light. You might walk toward a nearby crater, your boots sinking into the fine, flour-like dust. This dust, as we mentioned before, is your constant companion. It is electrostatically charged, clinging to your suit with a stubborn persistence. When you return to the airlock, You must spend an hour meticulously brushing it off, ensuring that not a single grain of the toxic perchlorates enters the living quarters. But the dust also holds the history of the solar system. You pick up a rock, a piece of dark, volcanic basalt. On Earth, such a rock would be weathered by rain and worn by the wind. Here, it looks exactly as it did when it cooled from a lava flow billions of years ago. To hold a Martian rock is to hold a piece of the deep past. You are a geologist in the ultimate museum. As you look toward the horizon, you might see the distant, hazy silhouette of Olympus Mons. It is the largest volcano in the solar system, a shield volcano so massive that it would cover the entire country of France. Its peak sits 22 kilometers high, poking out above the thickest part of the atmosphere into the near vacuum of space. It is so broad that if you stood at its base, you wouldn't even realize you were looking at a mountain. The curve of the planet would hide the summit from view. It is a feature of a world that does things on a scale the Earth cannot match. Then, there is the Val Marineris, the Grand Canyon of Mars. But to call it a canyon is like calling the ocean a puddle. It is a vast tectonic crack in the planet's crust, 4,000 kilometers long and 7 kilometers deep. If you placed it on Earth, it would stretch from New York City to Los Angeles. Imagine standing on the rim of that abyss, looking down into shadows that haven't seen the sun in millions of years. The scale of the landscape is a constant reminder of your own insignificance. You are a tiny, fragile spark of life in a world of geological giants. But the most profound moments on Mars happen during the quiet times, the off-duty hours. You might sit by the small porthole in the habitat and watch the sky. As the sun begins to set, the butterscotch haze of the afternoon begins to cool. The sky near the horizon turns that eerie crystalline blue. And then, the stars appear. Because the atmosphere is so thin, the stars do not twinkle. They are steady, piercing points of light, far more numerous than any you have seen from Earth. You can see the Milky Way with a clarity that is almost overwhelming, a brilliant, glowing river of dust and suns that seems to arch directly over the habitat. And there, rising in the east, is the morning star, or the evening star. But it isn't Venus, it is Earth. From the surface of Mars, the Earth is a bright, sapphire blue light. If you have a pair of binoculars, you can see it as a tiny disk, and next to it, an even smaller point of light, the moon. It is a haunting sight. Everything you have ever known, every person who has ever lived, every forest, every ocean, every city, it is all contained within that single, steady blue spark. You feel a sense of profound connection, a longing for the green, as some astronauts call it. You miss the smell of rain on hot asphalt. You miss the sound of wind in the trees. You miss the simple, effortless act of taking a breath of cool, moist air. To cope with this longing, you turn inward. The crew becomes your family. In the history of exploration, the success of a mission often depended on the social cohesion of the group. On the way to Mars, you were busy with the transit. On the landing, you were focused on survival. But now, in the long months of the stay, you must face each other. You eat together, you exercise together, you solve problems together. You learn the rhythms of each other's voices, the subtle signs of stress, the quiet moments of joy. You might spend an evening in the communal area, which is really just a small table surrounded by equipment. You share stories of home. You watch digital movies sent from Earth weeks ago, or you play games that don't require much space. These small, human rituals are the glue that keeps the mission from falling apart. Without them, the hostility of the planet outside would eventually seep into the mind. Consider the psychology of the desert. On Earth, people who live in vast empty spaces, the Bedouin of the Sahara, the Inuit of the Arctic, the researchers in Antarctica, often describe a shift in their perception. The mind becomes more attuned to small details. A change in the texture of the snow, a shift in the color of the sand, a new sound in the wind. These things become significant. On Mars, this is amplified. You notice the way the light hits a certain rock at 3 in the Sol. You notice the pattern of the frost as it forms on the solar panels. You become a part of the Martian landscape, a slow-moving observer of a world that is usually frozen in time. But even as you settle into this rhythm, the planet never lets you forget where you are. There are the dust storms. Sometimes, a small dust devil will dance past the habitat, a harmless column of spinning red sand. But other times, the wind picks up across the entire planet. Because there are no oceans to break the weather patterns, a dust storm on Mars can grow until it enshrouds the entire globe. Imagine the sun slowly disappearing behind a thick, reddish-gray veil. The light turns a deep, bruised crimson. The solar panels, your primary source of power, begin to fail as the dust blocks the rays. You must retreat into the habitat, turning off all non-essential systems, huddling in the dim light of the backup batteries. Outside, the world has vanished. There is only the roar of the thin wind and the steady tick-tick-tick of the dust hitting the hull. These storms can last for weeks. During this time, the isolation is absolute. You are trapped in a metal box, buried in a red fog, waiting for the sun to return. It is during these storms that the overview effect turns into something deeper. You realize that you are not just visiting Mars, you are participating in its life. You are witnessing the raw, unfiltered processes of a planet. You are seeing the weather that shaped the craters and the winds that carved the canyons. You feel a strange kind of kinship with the red planet. It is not home, and it never will be in the biological sense, but it is the world that is currently sustaining you. As the storm clears and the sun once again breaks through the haze, the world looks different. The dust has settled into new patterns. The rocks have been polished just a little bit more. And your gas tank, the fuel generator, is still humming away, slowly turning the Martian air into the fire that will eventually carry you home. This long stay is a test of patience. We live in an age of instant gratification, where we expect results in seconds. But the journey to Mars is measured in seasons. You must wait for the planets to align once more. You must wait for the chemistry to complete its work. You must wait for the window of opportunity to open. In the history of the British Empire, there were outposts so remote that the residents would wait a year for a single ship to bring news from home. Life on Mars is a return to that era of slow news. A message from Earth takes 20 minutes to arrive. A supply ship takes 7 months. You learn to live in the present, to focus on the task at hand, to find beauty in the red dust and the blue sunset. You think of the explorers of the past, men like Shackleton, who stayed with his crew in the Antarctic ice for over a year, maintaining discipline and hope against impossible odds. You think of the early settlers of the American West, who spent winters in sod houses, waiting for the spring. You are part of that lineage now. You are the sod house generation of the space age, living in a pressurized hut on a frozen frontier, holding the line for those who will come after you. The stay on the surface is the heart of the mission. It is where the science is done, where the history is made, and where the human spirit is truly tested. It is a time of profound quiet, punctuated by the occasional mechanical alarm or the sound of the wind. It is a time of blue sunsets and butterscotch dawns. As you look out the porthole one last time before sleep, you see the Earth again. It is a little further along in its orbit now, a little brighter, a little closer. The time is coming. The fuel tanks are almost full. The engines are being checked. The long stay is entering its final phase. But as you close your eyes, you realize that a part of you will never leave this place. You have breathed its manufactured air. You have walked its ancient dust, and you have seen its blue sun. You have become a creature of two worlds. The red planet is no longer a destination. It is a memory, an experience, and a home. Rest now, in the steady hum of the habitat. The Martian night is long and cold, but you are warm. The machines are working, the chemistry is flowing, and the stars are watching. Tomorrow is another Sol, another day of red dust and blue light, another step towards a day when you will finally leave the surface and begin the long climb back to the sapphire spark in the sky. The transition from the surface back to the stars will be a journey of fire, just as the arrival was. But that is a story for later. For now, let the stillness of the Martian plains fill your mind. Imagine the vast, empty reaches of the Val Marineris, the silent peaks of the Tharsis volcanoes, and the slow, eternal drift of the dust. The planet is at rest, and you are a guest in its house, a silent observer of a world that was old before the first life ever stirred on Earth. Sleep in the 0.38 gravity, feeling light and peaceful, as the fourth planet carries you through the dark, on its endless, circular path around the sun. The low hum of the CO2 scrubbers is your lullaby. The faint vibration of the Moxie unit is the heartbeat of your survival. You are safe. You are a pioneer. You are a human being on Mars, and for tonight, that is enough. The history of the future is being written in your very presence, in the quiet rhythm of your sleep, on a world that has finally found a voice. There is a specific kind of melancholy that comes with the end of a residency, a quiet realization that the place which has sustained you is about to become a memory. On Earth, we feel this when we pack the last box in an old house, or when we look back at a city from the window of a departing train. But on Mars, this feeling is amplified by the sheer scale of the distance you are about to put between yourself and the red dust. For hundreds of sols, this pressurized habitat has been your entire universe. You have come to know every hum of its ventilation, every creak of its hull as it expands in the daytime sun, and every shadow that the butterscotch light throws across the floor. Now, the time has come to step out of the sanctuary, not for another walk on the surface, but for the final climb back into the cold, silent deep. The preparation for departure is a slow, methodical ritual. It is not like a launch on Earth, where thousands of people are watching and a massive infrastructure supports every second of the countdown. Here, it is just you, your crew, and the machines you have tended like living things. The most important of these machines is the Mars Ascent Vehicle, or the MAV. For the duration of your stay, the MAV has been sitting silently on its landing legs, a few hundred meters from the habitat. It is a small, cramped capsule sitting atop a two-stage rocket, and for the last year, it has been performing a quiet miracle. Using the Sabatier reactor we spoke of, it has been breathing in the Martian atmosphere and mining the soil to fill its tanks with liquid methane and oxygen. You are about to ride a pillar of fire, fueled by the very planet you are leaving. As you perform the final checks, the weight of the mission's complexity settles in your chest. To get to Mars, you had to survive a landing. To get home, you must survive a launch from a world that has never seen a rocket rise from its surface. There is no mission control just down the road. There are no emergency abort sites. There is only the physics of the ascent. You strap yourself into the seat, feeling the 0.38 gravity of Mars one last time. Through the small window of the MAV, you see the habitat, the small silver bubble that kept you alive. You see the footprints you made months ago, still crisp and sharp in the red dust. And then the countdown begins. The ignition is a sudden, jarring break from the stillness of the Martian plains. The MAV was built for efficiency, not comfort. The roar of the engines vibrates through your suit, a violent metallic screaming that signals the end of your time as a resident of the surface. On Earth, a rocket must fight through a thick, heavy atmosphere. On Mars, the air is thin, but the gravity is still significant enough to demand a massive amount of energy to escape. As the rocket rises, the horizon begins to tilt and drop away. The Valles Marineris, that great scar on the planet's face, becomes a dark line on a curved red ball. The sky shifts rapidly from butterscotch to a bruised purple, and then, with a final, silent lurch, as the first stage falls away, it turns to the absolute velvet black of space. You are no longer a creature of the dust. You are once again a passenger of the void. But the journey home is not as simple as pointing toward the Earth. You are currently in a low Martian orbit, moving at thousands of kilometers per hour. Somewhere above you, drifting in the silent dark, is the return transit vehicle, the large, shielded ship that has been waiting for you in orbit for over a year. It is your lifeboat, your ticket across the abyss. The docking procedure is a delicate, high-speed dance. In the vacuum of space, there is no sound, only the visual confirmation of the radar and the slow, steady approach of the two vessels. When the latches finally click into place, the vibration travels through the hull like a heartbeat. You are back in the ship that brought you here. You are home, in a sense, even though you are still millions of kilometers away from a breath of fresh air. Now begins the second long transit, the homeward arc. On the way to Mars, the mission was defined by anticipation, by the thrill of the unknown, and by the psychological goal of the landing. But the journey back is different. It is a test of endurance and a battle against the slow decay of the human body. By now, you have been away from Earth for nearly 2 years. Despite the hours of daily exercise on the treadmills and resistance machines, your body has changed. Your bones are thinner, your muscles have lost the dense strength of an Earth dweller, and your cardiovascular system has adapted to the ease of low gravity. You are a fragile version of the person who left. The ship is older now too. The systems have been running continuously for hundreds of days. The air has a slightly different scent, a metallic, recycled quality that no amount of scrubbing can entirely remove. The crew is quieter. You have said everything there is to say. You have shared every memory, every joke, and every fear. You move through the ship with a practiced, ghostly efficiency, drifting from the galley to the sleeping quarters in the perpetual twilight of the interior lights. The big eye of isolation that we discussed before becomes even more pronounced. You find yourself staring out the observation port for hours, watching the red disk of Mars shrink until it is once again just a rusted spark in the dark. But there is a new light to watch now. On the way out, the Earth was a disappearing memory. On the way back, it is a returning hope. At first, it is just a bright blue star, indistinguishable from the others to an untrained eye. But as the months of the return transit pass, it begins to grow. It becomes a disk. You start to see the white swirls of clouds, the deep, dark blues of the oceans, and the familiar shapes of the continents. To an astronaut returning from Mars, the sight of the Earth is almost overwhelming. After 2 years of red, orange, and butterscotch, the color blue feels like a physical sensation. It is the color of water, of life, and of a world that doesn't require a suit to survive. This part of the journey is where the overview effect reaches its peak. You are looking at the only place in the known universe where life has flourished on a grand scale. You think about the billions of people on that blue marble, most of whom are going about their days without ever looking up to see your tiny spark moving across their sky. You think about the forests you want to walk in, the rain you want to feel on your face, and the simple, profound luxury of a world that provides everything you need to live, for free, just by existing. The physics of the return journey are dictated by the same Hohmann transfer orbit that brought you out, but the stakes feel higher. If the propulsion system fails now, you won't drift toward a new world. You will drift forever in the solar graveyard, a permanent monument to human ambition. The navigators on Earth are constantly adjusting your trajectory, accounted for the subtle tugs of the planets and the pressure of the solar wind. You are on a long, falling curve toward a blue target that is moving at 30 kilometers per second. To hit it, the math must be perfect. As the 7th month of the return transit draws to a close, the ship begins to feel the first faint influence of the Earth's gravity. It is a ghostly sensation at first, a slight change in the way objects drift when you let go of them, but it signals the beginning of the end. You are no longer falling through the void. You are being pulled home. The crew begins the process of deactivating the deep space systems and preparing the re-entry capsule. This is a bittersweet time. The ship has been your protector for 2 years. It has shielded you from the radiation of the sun and the vacuum of the abyss. To leave it is to leave the only home you have known in the space age. You crawl into the small, cramped re-entry module, the same type of craft that the Apollo astronauts used, but built with the advanced materials of a new century. The hatches are sealed. The umbilical lines that provided you with power and air from the main ship are severed. You are now in a tiny, independent pod, plummeting toward the top of the Earth's atmosphere. The transition from the silence of space to the roar of the air is about to begin again, but this time the air is thick and blue. As you wait for the first contact with the atmosphere, you reflect on the distance you have covered. You have traveled hundreds of millions of kilometers. You have seen things that no human being in history ever saw. You have lived through the silence of the transit, the fire of the landing, the toxic dust of the planes, and the long, lonely wait of the stay. You are the first of your kind, a bridge between worlds. And then, the first wisps of Earth's atmosphere catch the heat shield. The vibration starts as a low hum, then builds into a thundering roar that dwarfs the Martian entry. The G-forces return with a vengeance. After 2 years of weightlessness and low gravity, the 4 Gs of an Earth re-entry feel like an elephant sitting on your chest. Your lungs struggle to expand. Your heart labors to pump blood to your brain. It is a brutal, violent welcome back to the world of your birth. Outside the window, the plasma glow is not orange like it was on Mars, but a brilliant, searing white. The heat shield is shedding its layers, protecting you from the 5,000-degree temperatures of the friction. You are a meteor, a man-made star falling out of the night sky. And then, as the speed drops and the roar begins to fade, you hear a sound that you haven't heard in years. It is the sound of air. Thick, real, whistling air rushing past the hull. The parachutes deploy with a series of jolts that feel like a car crash, but to you, they are the most beautiful sensations in the world. The craft slows, swaying gently under the massive nylon canopies. Through the window, you see the horizon. It isn't red, it isn't butterscotch. It is a deep, vibrant blue, meeting the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean. You are falling toward water, real, liquid water, more than you have seen in your entire life combined. The splashdown is a sudden, wet impact that sends a spray of salt water over the portholes. The module bobs in the waves, the motion of the ocean making your inner ear scream after years of stability. You are dizzy, you are weak, and you are being crushed by the weight of 1G, but you are breathing. The air in the capsule is hot and smells of scorched metal and salt, but it is Earth air. As the recovery teams approach and the hatch is finally opened, the first thing you feel is the wind. It isn't the moan of the Martian thin air. It is a heavy, moist, living breeze that carries the scent of the sea. You are carried out of the capsule on a stretcher, your legs unable to support the weight of a world they no longer remember. You look up, and the sky is blue. There are clouds. There is a sun that looks the right size. The return journey is over. You have survived the most difficult thing our species has ever attempted. But as you lie there, feeling the steady pull of the earth, a part of your mind is still back there, on the red plains. You remember the blue sunset. You remember the silence of the Val Marineris. You remember the steady blue spark of Earth in the Martian sky. You have come home, but you are no longer the person who left. You are a citizen of the solar system now, a witness to the fact that the Great Divide can be bridged. The story of the return is a story of gravity and memory. It is the process of reclaiming your humanity from the void. In the final part of our journey, we will reflect on what this means for the future, how the first footprints on Mars changed the way we look at our own world, and what it means for the next generation of explorers who will look at that red spark and know that it is no longer an impossible destination, but a reachable shore. For now, rest in the weight of the world. Listen to the waves and the wind. You are back in the cradle, and the long, silent dark is behind you. The journey of fire and dust has brought you back to the green and the blue, and the history of the two worlds is now forever intertwined in the story of your return. The heavy, humid air of Earth feels like a warm embrace, yet it carries a physical weight you haven't felt in cycles. As you lie in the recovery bay of the ship that plucked you from the sea, the rhythmic rocking of the waves serves as a heartbeat, reminding you that you are no longer a resident of a static, frozen world. But even as the medical teams monitor your heart rate and the slow rebuilding of your bone density, your mind remains suspended in the transition. This final part of our journey is not about the mechanics of engines or the chemistry of fuel. It is about the legacy of the voyage and the profound shift in the human perspective that occurs when we look back at our home from the red frontier. To understand the meaning of a journey to Mars, we must look at the long view of history. For most of our existence, the horizon was a physical barrier. For the early tribes wandering the plains of Africa, the horizon was the edge of the known world. Beyond it lay mystery, danger, and the unknown. When we mastered the oceans, the horizon moved to the edge of the sea. When we mastered the air, it moved to the edge of the atmosphere. And in 1969, when the first humans stood on the moon, the horizon moved to the edge of our local gravitational neighborhood. But Mars represents a different kind of horizon. It is the first step into the deep ocean of the solar system. If the moon was a coastal voyage, Mars is the first crossing of the Atlantic. It is the moment we stop being a single planet species and begin the long, slow process of becoming a multi-planetary civilization. This isn't just a change in geography. It is a change in the fundamental nature of humanity. Imagine the sensory shock of returning to a living world. On Mars, every smell was recycled, filtered, and metallic. The air was a manufactured product, dry and sterile. But here, the world is an explosion of scent. You smell the salt of the ocean, the dampness of the earth, the sweetness of blooming flowers, and the sharp, clean scent of rain on hot asphalt. These are the smells of 1 billion years of biological evolution, a complexity that no machine can truly replicate. You realize that your lungs, your skin, and your very DNA were designed for this specific pressure, this specific humidity, and this specific blend of nitrogen and oxygen. You are home, not just in a house, but in the biological cradle that shaped everything you are. Consider the children who will be born after the first Mars landing. For them, the idea of humans living on two worlds will be a basic fact of life, as unremarkable as the existence of the internet or the fact that we can fly across oceans in a few hours. They will grow up looking at the night sky, not as a distant, unreachable tapestry, but as a map of places people actually go. The psychological wall that has contained us for 300,000 years will have been breached forever. This shift in consciousness is the true value of the mission. When we look at the Earth from the surface of Mars, it is no longer a world of continents and nations. It is a pale blue dot, a tiny, shimmering spark in the evening twilight. From that distance, the conflicts and divisions of our history seem impossibly small. You see a world that is a single, unified organism, a lonely oasis in a desert of vacuum and radiation. This is the cosmic overview effect. When the Apollo astronauts saw the Earth rise over the lunar horizon, they saw a world without borders, a fragile, lonely marble in the dark. But when you look at Earth from Mars, you see something even more profound. You see a destination. You see the source of everything you are, yet you are standing on a world that is fundamentally different. You realize that humanity is not just a product of Earth. We are the consciousness of the universe, and our job is to carry that light to places that are currently dark and silent. The difficulty of the mission, the physics that pushed back against us, the distances that defied our intuition, the radiation that threatened our DNA, is precisely why the mission matters. If it were easy, it would be a vacation. Because it is almost impossible, it is an act of evolution. We go to Mars not because there is gold there, or because we need more room, but because the act of going forces us to become better than we are. It forces us to solve problems of energy, of recycling, of cooperation, and of endurance that we might otherwise ignore. The technology developed to keep a crew alive on Mars for 2 years will inevitably find its way back to Earth, helping us manage our own resources, our own climate, and our own health with a precision we never thought possible. But beyond the technology, there is the philosophy of the frontier. A society that stops exploring is a society that begins to turn inward, to wither and repeat itself. Exploration provides a vent for human ambition and a mirror for human capability. Mars is the ultimate mirror. It shows us our fragility, but it also shows us our incredible, stubborn resilience. It shows us that we can take the cold, toxic dust of a dead world and, through sheer force of will and mathematics, turn it into a home. Think of the historical lineage you now belong to. You are the descendant of the Polynesians who navigated the vast Pacific using only the stars and the swell of the waves. You are the kin of the Vikings who crossed the North Atlantic in open wooden boats, and the explorers who mapped the interior of continents they didn't yet understand. But your journey was different because you left the biosphere itself. You carried a pocket of Earth with you across a void that is hostile to all life. This achievement is a bridge. It connects our past as wandering tribes to our future as a spacefaring civilization. It is the greatest history to relax story ever written, because it is a story of peace, a mission where the entire world came together to support a handful of people reaching for the stars. Consider the silence you left behind on the Red Plains. That silence has existed for 4 billion years. The craters of Mars have watched the sun rise and set over 1 billion times without a single eye to witness them. By being there, you gave that world a witness. You turned a piece of geology into a place. You gave names to the rocks and the hills. You brought the first echoes of human thought to a world that had known only the slow, patient erosion of the eons. In the grand timeline of the universe, your stay was less than a blink of an eye. But in the history of life, it was a turning point. You proved that life is not a prisoner of its planet of origin. Life is a flame that, given the right tools and the right courage, can be carried across the dark. As you sit in your garden weeks after your return, watching a summer storm roll in, you find yourself mesmerized by the rain. On Mars, you spent hundreds of sols dreaming of this, the smell of ozone, the dark grey of the clouds, the sound of water hitting the leaves. You realize that going to Mars doesn't make you love Earth less. It makes you love it with a terrifying intensity. From the perspective of the Val Marineris, the Earth is the most precious thing in the universe. It is a miracle of biology, a sapphire jewel protected by a thin, fragile veil of air. You find yourself walking barefoot on the grass, just to feel the moisture and the texture of a living surface. You watch the birds, you listen to the wind in the trees, and you feel a sense of profound gratitude for the simple, effortless act of breathing. The journey to Mars is a narrative of millions of kilometers and hundreds of days. It is a story that begins with a dream and ends with a legacy. It is a reminder that we are the descendants of explorers, the children of those who looked at the horizon and decided to see what was on the other side. The red planet will continue its slow, steady orbit. The dust will continue to settle, but the silence will never be the same. Somewhere on those plains, there is a small silver habitat and a set of footprints that will last for 1,000 years. They are a message to the universe. We were here. We reached across the dark. We saw the blue sunset, and we found our way home. The final lesson of Mars is one of humility and hope. We learn that we are small, and the universe is vast beyond our comprehension. But we also learn that we are capable of extraordinary things when we focus our collective intelligence and our shared humanity on a common goal. The history to relax is not just the history of what we have done, but the history of what we are becoming. We are the architects of a new era, the ones who decided that the sky was not a ceiling, but a floor. Rest now in the comfort of your homeworld. The great divide has been crossed. The long transit is a memory. The fire of the entry has faded. You are back in the green and the blue, but the red world is still out there, waiting for the next ship, the next crew, and the next chapter of the human story. The impossible is simply what we haven't done yet, and now we have done this. The stars are no longer just lights in the sky. They are destinations. And the red spark in the twilight is no longer a stranger, but a neighbor. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the Earth as it looks from deep space. A tiny, vibrant marble hanging in the blackness. See the lights of the cities beginning to twinkle as the night moves across the continents. See the oceans, the mountains, and the forests. And then, let your mind drift further out, past the moon, across the millions of kilometers of vacuum to the red plains of Mars. See the habitat, silent and still in the Martian night. See the blue sunset fading over the horizon. Feel the connection between these two worlds, a thread of human courage and curiosity that binds them together. The journey is complete, but the exploration never ends. Every night as the sun sets, the universe opens up before us, inviting us to look up and wonder. We have taken the first step, and the path is now open for all who will follow. Sleep deeply, knowing that the horizon has moved, and the universe is a little bit smaller and a little bit more like home than it was before you left. The red dust is still, the sensors are steady, and the history of the future is being written in every heartbeat of the world you have returned to. The low hum of the world around you, the crickets in the grass, the distant sound of the sea, the soft breathing of the people you love, is your new lullaby. You are safe. You are a pioneer who has returned to the garden. You are a human being who has walked on another world, and for tonight, that is enough. The long, silent dark is behind you, and the dawn will bring a world that is more beautiful than you ever imagined, because now you know exactly how rare and precious it truly is. Sleep in the 1G of your home, feeling heavy, grounded, and at peace. The red planet carries on its endless dance, and the story of your journey is now a part of the stars.